This video starts by showing dance students crafting a tensegrity model. Here we work with straws and elastics to craft the model. The tensegrity model is used to think about bodies as biotensegrity systems. The model sits in contrast to the biomechanical model of the body and one championed by researchers of fascia. The mechanistic model of the body is where bones are imagined to be stacked on top of one another like a pile of bricks, and the muscles and connective tissues are thought to control them like rigging in a sailing ship. Each joint is considered in isolation from others. A biotensegrity model represents a significant conceptual shift from the view that our bones are the load-bearing structure in our bodies like the framing of a house, to one where they are floating within the tensional matrix of the fascia and muscle. It highlights the dynamic relational architecture of the body where parts and wholes are always in relation, listening and peculiarly sensitive to the modification of the other. We use this model in a dance studio practice as a research laboratory to think about and move with the emerging biological material called fascia. In asking what the models can do, the focus shifts to how models can be productive, literally putting the dancer into motion, rather than having to be a true representation of the body. Just as scientists are continually reconfigured by their instruments and data within responsive media, dancers are reconfigured by the way they imagine their body minds. Fascia, or connective tissue, is a viscous goop that connects, divides, and slides among muscles, organs, skin, and cells. It is found to be active, intelligent, communicative, and a sensory organ, sometimes three, sometimes many, sometimes one, liquid, solid, and mucus, and still in a pre-paradigm state. Within our fascia research movement lab, we crafted scores as a kind of method to think with different emerging models. Scoring as method is a way to think with Spinoza's question, we don't know yet what a body can do. Within practices research, choreographers and other performers learn through iterative exploration with their bodies. Scoring takes ideas and images and instead of figuring out what they mean, sets up exercises that examines the problem or concern. In this case, fascia, so that people can collaboratively work with it in motion together. Scores can be thought of as a loose set of instructions that guides a group of people to interact with each other. Because the instructions don't dictate everything that might emerge, and the time between instructions changes, participants become quite mindful of how they are drawn to move or talk or pay attention in some ways and not others, and how they make choices about how to follow the rules or not. All of these are forms of attention to habits of thought, speech, and action, and in attending to habits, one often experiences new ways of not being habitual. In thinking with a tensegrity model, we think with the modes of attention that emerged in reenacting the tensional score seen on the screen in three different locations. The first, a fascia research lab in Humboldt State University, where the score was crafted by a group of dancers. 2, a workshop on ensemble dance led by Nita Little in a dance studio in Berkeley, California. And 3, in the Tenderloin National Forest during a rehearsal with residents of the single-occupancy hotels in San Francisco. In the tensional score, what came to the foreground changed each time it was reenacted. One element that was foregrounded in Humboldt was the dancer's ability to attend to the layers of sliding, gliding, and stickiness or friction as they held on to different pieces of clothing or a body part of each other. Someone holding a cotton t-shirt would notice it might easily slide over a synthetic shirt underneath, whereas jean material would stick on the skin. This ability of the material to stick or slide allowed a dancer to move in particular directions and at particular speed and not others. The properties of the material that were put into play included the texture, elastic quality of the material, the shear strength, the rips and tears in materials, the buttons and zippers, or how the materials were pulled into tension by those grabbing them, all created constraints and possibilities on the movement of each individual and the shape or movement of the whole group. The ability to slide and glide and or create stickiness directed vectors of force and tension along some pathways and not others. This score allowed the dancers to attend to the relation of the vectors of glide and friction moving through and across bodies. It resulted in a stance of being ready, or a kind of attuning to the multiplicity of rhythms, tempos, and directions at play in the ecology of the group. In the second site, the dance studio in Berkeley, Nita Little asked the dancers working in the ensemble to think with a tensegrity model and extend its possibilities to the body-mind and what she calls the tactility of attention. Attentional tensegrity is a structure formed when multiple body-minds are held together through a network of mutually acting attentional bonds. Its properties include spatial flexibility, productive difference of independent actors, and a kind of knowledge exchange within the system so that changing one changes all. To understand this last property, one must continue to recognize attention as the product of the embodied mind. Not all change is visible, especially to the untrained eye or untrained attender. A positional change of one may or may not produce an immediate positional change of all. Yet there is an immediate change throughout the whole system on the level of attention. Nita asks the dancers to notice your partner's attention to you. Notice they're noticing you. When working in partners, you then extend this to a group. Attentional tensegrity is the result of the tactile presence being articulated through an expansive and extensive sense of embodiment. It is a refusal to limit the felt body-mind to its flesh form. Acting spatially, the body-mind becomes a flexible form, limited by skills of attentional concentration and engagement. Under certain conditions, embodied attention has cohesive properties that form attentional bonds that can move body-minds. Nita's biotensegrity tensegrity model is continuous with our simple tensegrity models by thinking with attention to extend it spatially, thus incorporating yet another scale, one that coordinates inter or intrapersonally, and one that thinks in group dancing systems. On this extended scale, biological forms are critical to the functioning of attentional forms, and neither can be understood separately. Slide, glide, and friction can be found across bodies and clothing, but also noticed within group attentional practices. The third site where this attentional score was reenacted was in the Tenderloin area of San Francisco. The score was shared with the residents of the Tenderloin as part of a site-based rehearsal process called RACE. Many of the residents are poor people of color living in affordable housing units in an area of San Francisco under immense pressure from the surrounding gentrification process. Leroy, a longtime resident of the Tenderloin and elder of the dancers, pointed out that he was not so much interested in attending to the slide, glide, and friction found in fascia, but was more interested in attending to the person who was in a tight space. He asked the group to attend to this person at any given moment. Leroy's attention practice worked against capitalistic flows inherent in what's called bio-value, or the ability to attend to what is going to grow more wealth, individual accumulation, or individual freedom and movement. He asks us to attend to who is caught in the flow of any particular moment. Leroy highlights that bodies are always caught in painful and contradictory matrices of support and negation, and these very contradictions can impact the glide and friction inherent in individual bodies. In this dance, instead of asking us how I or one person can be more free in their movement, you look around and train yourself to continuously ask, who is the least free here? It is a different question which results in different modes of being in relation and might result in a different kind of accumulation of value. In this score, we attended to the shifting constraints that improvisers negotiate. We came to sense into how one's social and historical positions in the world affects one's ability to move both literally and figuratively, and how one contributes to the constraints on bodies that one is in relation to. Dance theorist Daniel Goldman writes that to ignore the constraints that improvisers encounter is not only to deny improvisation's most significant power as full-bodied critical engagement in the world, one that is characterized by both flexibility and perpetual readiness. Leroy was training us to be ready to not the individual freedom, but how the group shapes the particular freedom of any one individual.